Before everyone says I destroyed my own marriage, before you decide I'm the villain here, please just listen to my side. Because I'm exhausted from being painted as the bad guy when I was just trying to communicate my needs. When I was just being honest about my feelings. Yes, I told my husband he should look at old photos of my ex for inspiration. Yes, I used that exact word. But I didn't mean it literally. I didn't mean it as an insult. I was trying to explain what I needed in our relationship, trying to give him examples of the kind of effort I was missing. I didn't think he'd go silent, didn't think he'd walk to the closet, pull out my suitcase, and start packing my clothes while I stood there frozen. Didn't think he'd sit down in the chair by our bed, fold his arms and just watch me. Like I was a stranger, like I was already gone. I didn't think he'd make me feel like an intruder in my own home. My name is Monica. I'm 32 years old, and until yesterday, I was married to a man named James. We'd been together for 4 years, married for 2, and I thought we had a decent relationship. Not perfect, no relationship is perfect, but decent, comfortable. The kind of marriage where you settle into routines and rhythms. But that comfort, that routine, was suffocating me. Because before James, there was Derek, and Derek knew how to make me feel alive. Derek was my ex-boyfriend from college. We'd dated for 3 intense years before graduating and going our separate ways. Him to law school in California, me to a marketing job in Seattle. The distance killed us, but the memories didn't die. Memories of spontaneous road trips, passionate arguments that ended in passionate reconciliations, the feeling that every moment mattered because Derek made it matter. James was different, stable, predictable, sweet. He worked as an accountant, came home at the same time every day, kissed me on the forehead with the same gentle pressure, asked about my day with the same caring tone. He was consistent in a way Derek never was, reliable in a way I'd told myself I needed after the chaos of my relationship with Derek. We'd met through mutual friends at a barbecue 3 years ago. James had been quiet but attentive, remembering details I'd mentioned in passing, following up weeks later to ask how things turned out. He'd courted me properly, actual dates, flowers, thoughtful gestures. After 2 years of dating, he'd proposed at the restaurant where we'd had our first date, with a ring he'd saved for months to buy. It was perfect, traditional, exactly what I should have wanted. Before we continue, like, subscribe, and hit hype to boost this episode. Drop your city or country. I love seeing where you're watching from. But should and want are different things. For 2 years of marriage, I'd tried to be happy with what I had. Tried to appreciate James's steadiness instead of missing Derek's unpredictability. Tried to focus on the security James provided instead of the excitement Derek had created. But late at night, lying next to my sleeping husband, I'd scroll through old photos on my phone. Pictures from my college years, Derek's arm around my waist, both of us laughing at some inside joke. The spontaneity, the passion, the feeling that life was happening instead of just passing by. I'd compare without meaning to. The way Derek used to surprise me with weekend trips versus James's carefully planned vacations with itineraries and reservations made months in advance. The way Derek would show up at my apartment with my favorite takeout just because versus James's routine of cooking the same meals on rotation. The way Derek kissed me like he was claiming me versus James's gentle, considerate affection. I know it wasn't fair. I know you can't build a life on spontaneity and passion. I know Derek had his flaws, his temper, his jealousy, his tendency to disappear into his work for days. But my brain didn't care about fair. My brain just knew what it missed. The fight that ended everything started yesterday evening over something completely mundane. James had planned a date night. He always planned date nights for the first Friday of every month, part of his routine, part of his reliability. Dinner at the Italian place we always went to, a movie he'd researched and picked, based on reviews, then home by 10:30 because we both had work in the morning. It was fine, perfectly fine. Everything with James was fine. And that was the problem. "Did you enjoy dinner?" James had asked in the car on the way home, his voice warm and genuine. "It was good." I'd tried to inject enthusiasm into my voice and failed. "Just good. You seemed distracted all night." "I'm fine, just tired." "Monica." He'd glanced at me at a red light, concern in his eyes. "Talk to me. What's going on?" And I'd snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just snapped. "Nothing's going on. This is what's going on. This exact thing. The same restaurant, the same type of movie, the same drive home, the same conversation. Everything is the same. I thought you liked consistency. You said you appreciated knowing what to expect after..." He'd stopped himself. "After Derek. You can say his name." "After Derek, yeah. I said I wanted stability, and you gave me stability. Congratulations. Mission accomplished." "That doesn't sound like a compliment." "Maybe that's because I'm bored, James. Maybe that's because I feel like I'm living the same day over and over. Maybe that's because nothing exciting ever happens anymore." His hands had tightened on the steering wheel. "What do you want me to do? I try to plan nice dates. I try to be thoughtful. What more do you want?" And that's when I said it. The sentence that destroyed everything. "I don't know. Maybe look at some old photos of my ex for inspiration or something." The car had gone silent except for the sound of the engine. James had pulled into our driveway, put the car in park, and just sat there. "What did you just say?" His voice had been quiet. Too quiet. "I didn't mean... It came out wrong. I just meant that maybe you could put in more effort." "By looking at photos of your ex-boyfriend." Not a question, a statement. "That's not what I meant. I meant..." "You meant exactly what you said." He'd gotten out of the car, walked to the house, unlocked the door, and went inside without waiting for me. I'd followed, my stomach already churning because I knew I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. "James, please, let me explain." But he'd walked straight past me, straight to our bedroom, and I'd heard the closet door open. That's when I'd realized this wasn't going to be a fight we worked through. This was going to be something else entirely. I'd stood in the hallway for maybe 30 seconds, paralyzed by the sound of hangers sliding on the closet rod. Then I'd made myself walk to the bedroom doorway. James was pulling out my suitcase, the big one we'd used for our honeymoon. He'd set it on the bed, opened it, and started removing my clothes from my dresser drawers. Methodically, calmly, folding each item before placing it in the suitcase. "What are you doing?" My voice had come out small, scared. He hadn't answered. Just continued folding a sweater, placing it carefully in the suitcase. "James, stop. Please stop. Let's talk about this." Still nothing. He'd moved to my closet, started taking dresses off hangers. You can't kick me out over one sentence, one stupid thing I said." He'd paused then, a dress in his hands, and looked at me directly for the first time since we'd gotten home. His face was blank, completely blank. No anger, no hurt, no emotion at all. Just nothing. "Sit down," he'd said quietly. "What?" I said sit down. He'd pointed to the chair in the corner of our bedroom. "Or stand, I don't care, but you're going to watch this." "Watch what?" "Watch me pack your things, since apparently I need inspiration from your ex on how to do things right." The cold sarcasm in his voice had made my skin prickle. This wasn't James. James didn't do sarcasm. James didn't do cold. James was warm and patient and understanding, except he wasn't being any of those things now. "I'm sorry," I'd said, tears starting. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it the way it sounded." "Yes, you did." He'd gone back to packing, adding shoes to the suitcase. "You've been thinking it for months, maybe years. I just gave you permission to say it out loud." "That's not true." "Monica, I'm not stupid. I know you compare us. I've known for a long time." My stomach had dropped. "Known what?" that you never stopped thinking about him, that you kept photos, that you still check his social media, that you measure everything I do against what he used to do. I don't. You do. He'd opened my nightstand drawer then, and my blood had turned to ice. Because I knew what was in that drawer. Hidden under notebooks and hair ties and random junk, a printed photo. From college. Derek and me at some party, his arm around my waist, both of us laughing. I'd kept it because I couldn't let go completely. Because I needed a physical reminder that I'd once felt that kind of joy. James had held up the photo, looked at it for a long moment, then placed it carefully on top of the clothes in my suitcase. For inspiration, he'd said flatly. I'd wanted to disappear, wanted the floor to open up and swallow me, because there was no explanation for why I'd kept that photo. No way to spin it into something innocent. James, I found it 3 months ago. He'd continued packing like we were discussing the weather. I was looking for batteries and I found it. At first I thought maybe you'd forgotten it was there, but then I noticed it wasn't dusty, wasn't yellowed. It was in good condition, like you looked at it regularly. I don't. And I thought, okay, maybe everyone keeps mementos from past relationships. That's normal, right? So I didn't say anything. I just filed it away, told myself it didn't matter. He'd moved to my bathroom cabinet, started packing my toiletries. But then I noticed other things. The way you'd mention him in stories, always with this tone in your voice. This nostalgia. The way you'd compare our dates to things you did with him. The way you'd look disappointed when I did something thoughtful, like it wasn't thoughtful enough, or wasn't spontaneous enough, or wasn't dramatic enough. Each word was a knife, perfectly placed, cutting through every excuse I could have made. I tried harder, he'd continued. I planned surprise dates. I bought spontaneous gifts. I tried to be more adventurous, more exciting, more whatever it was you were missing. But it was never enough, was it? Because I'm not him. I'll never be him. I don't want you to be him. Then why did you tell me to look at his photos for inspiration? He'd stopped packing, looked at me directly. Explain that. Explain how that sentence means anything other than, you're not good enough, but maybe you can learn from someone who was. I'd opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Because he was right. That's exactly what I'd meant, even if I hadn't consciously articulated it that way. That's what I thought. He'd zipped up the suitcase, set it on the floor. There's more, but this should get you through a few days. I'll pack the rest later. A few days? What do you mean a few days? You can stay at a hotel, or with a friend, or with your parents. I don't care where, but you can't stay here. This is my home too. Is it? He'd tilted his head, studying me. Because it doesn't seem like you've really been here for a long time. You've been physically here, sure. But mentally, emotionally, you've been somewhere else. With someone else. With him. That's not fair. Fair. Something had cracked in his calm facade then, just for a moment. A flash of pain, quickly suppressed. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that I've spent 2 years trying to be enough for someone who never stopped wishing I was someone else? Is it fair that I planned date nights and cooked meals and remembered every little thing you mentioned, and all you saw was boring routine? Is it fair that I loved you completely while you kept one foot out the door? I do love you. No, Monica. You love what I provide. Security, stability, the things Derek couldn't give you. But you don't love me. You settled for me. And I'm done being someone's consolation prize. The truth of that had hit me like a physical blow, because part of me, the part I'd been trying to ignore for 2 years, knew he was right. I had settled. Not in a cruel way, not intentionally, but I'd chosen safety over passion, chosen the practical choice over the heart choice. And James had known. Maybe from the beginning. Maybe he'd hoped I'd eventually stop comparing. Maybe he'd thought love would grow over time, that I'd choose him not just once when I'd said yes to the proposal, but every day after that. But I hadn't. I'd gone through the motions while my heart stayed somewhere in the past with a man who'd never been right for me, but who'd made me feel things James never could. "I'll change," I'd whispered. "I'll do better. I'll stop comparing. I'll—" "Stop." He'd held up his hand. "Just stop, because we both know you won't. You can't. You've been trying to change for 2 years, and you're more miserable now than when we started. And I'm tired of being the reason you're miserable." He'd pulled out his phone then, and I'd watched in horror as he'd taken a photo of the printed picture he'd placed on my suitcase. The photo of Derek and me, evidence of my inability to let go. "What are you doing?" "Sending it to my sister. She's been asking why I seem stressed lately. Now she'll know." Please don't do that." But he'd already hit send. 10 seconds later, his phone had buzzed. He'd looked at the message, shown me the screen. His sister. "Are you kidding me?" "Throw her out. Now." "James, please." My own phone had started buzzing then. Text messages flooding in. His sister must have texted other people. Friends asking what was happening. My best friend asking if I'd really told James to look at my ex for inspiration. "How do they already know?" I'd asked, my hands shaking. "Group chat." He'd said it without emotion. "Family and close friends. I told them what happened. Figured I should control the narrative before you tried to spin it into something I did wrong. You're turning everyone against me. I'm telling people the truth. If that turns them against you, maybe that's something you should think about." He'd picked up my suitcase then, wheeled it toward the bedroom door. "Wait, where are you taking that?" "Front door, you need to leave." "I can't just leave. This is my house, my home." "It's my house, actually. Mortgage is in my name. You wanted to keep your finances separate, remember? For independence." He'd been right about that too. When we'd bought the house, I'd insisted on keeping things separate, maintaining my financial autonomy. I'd told myself it was about being modern and independent, but really, I'd been keeping an exit strategy open, just in case. "You're seriously kicking me out?" I'd followed him down the hallway, my voice rising. "Over one sentence? One stupid thing I said in a fight?" He'd stopped at the front door, set down the suitcase, turned to face me. "It wasn't one sentence. It was 2 years of sentences you thought but didn't say. 2 years of disappointment and comparison, and wishing I was someone else. This was just the first time you said it out loud. But I can fix this, I can do better." "How?" He'd looked at me with those empty eyes. "How are you going to fix the fact that you're in love with a memory? How are you going to fix the fact that you kept a photo of him hidden in your nightstand? How are you going to fix 2 years of me not being enough?" "You are enough." "Then why did you tell me to look at his photos for inspiration?" I hadn't been able to answer, because there was no good answer. The truth was I had meant it exactly the way he'd taken it. I'd wanted him to be more like Derek, more spontaneous, more exciting, more passionate. I'd wanted him to be someone he wasn't. That's what I thought. He'd opened the front door, wheeled my suitcase outside onto the porch. "My lawyer will be in touch about divorce proceedings. Until then, don't come back here." "Your lawyer?" The word had barely processed. "You already called a lawyer?" "I called him 3 months ago, after I found the photo. Had the papers drawn up last week. Just needed a final reason to file them." "You've been planning this?" "I've been preparing for it. Because I knew, Monica. I knew it was coming. I knew eventually you'd say something that crossed the line, and I'd finally have the courage to do what I should have done a long time ago." "Which is what? Give up on our marriage?" "Let go of someone who never really chose me in the first place." He'd stepped back inside, and I'd reached for the door, tried to push past him. "No." His voice had been firm. "You need to go." "James, please don't do this. I love you. I do love you. I need help. I need therapy or counseling or something. We can fix this together." "I don't want to fix it anymore. I'm tired of being a project, tired of being the safe choice, tired of competing with a ghost." "He's not a ghost. To me he is, because you turned him into one. You took a real person with real flaws and made him into some perfect fantasy that I could never compete with, and I'm done competing. So that's it? You're just giving up? No, Monica, you gave up 2 years ago when you married me while still in love with him. I'm just finally accepting it. He'd started closing the door, and I'd grabbed the frame, desperate. Where am I supposed to go? I booked you a room at the Marriott for tonight. Confirmation number is in your email. After that, you figure it out. Call your parents. Call a friend. Call Derek for all I care. I can't call Derek. Why not? He's your inspiration, right? Maybe he'll take you back. Maybe you'll finally be happy. I don't want Derek. I want you. No, you don't. You want what I provide while fantasizing about what he provided. And I'm done being part of that equation. He'd pulled the door firmly closed then, and I'd heard the lock click. Heard the deadbolt slide into place. Heard the chain being fastened. Standing on my own front porch with my suitcase, I'd felt my world collapse. I'd knocked, pounded, begged him to open the door, but there had been no response, just silence from inside the house that had been mine until 5 minutes ago. My phone had kept buzzing, message after message from friends and family, all variations on, "Is this true?" and "What were you thinking?" and "How could you do that to him?" I'd called James's number. It had rung once, then gone to voicemail. He'd rejected the call. I'd tried again. Same result. Tried texting. "Please let me in. Please let's talk about this." No response. No read receipt. I'd been blocked. I'd tried the back door, but it was locked. Tried the garage code, but it had been changed. Every entry point to the house, my house, the home I'd lived in for 2 years, was sealed against me. Finally, I dragged my suitcase to my car, gotten in, and just sat there in the driveway, staring at the dark windows of the house, trying to process what had just happened. One sentence. One stupid, thoughtless sentence about looking at my ex's photos for inspiration. And my husband had packed my things, kicked me out, and filed for divorce. All in less than an hour. The Marriott was nice. James had booked a suite. Of course he had, because even when he was divorcing me, he was considerate about my comfort. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd checked in at 10 p.m., the front desk clerk giving me a sympathetic smile that made me realize I must look like the disaster I felt like. Dragging a suitcase with my eyes red and swollen, my hands shaking as I signed the registration form. Room 1247. I'd taken the elevator up, found my room, and collapsed on the bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what the hell had just happened to my life. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I'd finally looked at it around midnight, scrolling through messages with a kind of numb detachment. Rachel, my best friend. James's sister just told me what happened. "Monica, please tell me there's more to this story." My mother. "James called. He's very hurt. He told us what you said. I think you need to come home and think about what you want." His sister Emily. "I never liked you. Now I know why." His brother. "You had a good man and you threw him away. Hope it was worth it." My college roommate. "Did you really tell him to look at Derek's photos?" WTF Monica. Derek. Someone had mentioned Derek, which meant the story was spreading beyond just James's immediate circle. Which meant soon, everyone would know that I'd destroyed my marriage by being unable to let go of my ex-boyfriend. I'd opened Instagram, a mistake, but I couldn't help myself. James had posted something an hour ago, a photo of our wedding rings, his sitting on a table, the caption simply, "Sometimes love isn't enough when you're not the one being loved." The comments were brutal, friends taking his side, telling him he deserved better, saying they'd always known something was off about me, a few people defending me, asking for his side of the story, but they were drowned out by the overwhelming support for James. And then I'd seen it. A comment from an account I didn't recognize at first. "You're better off, man. She never deserved you." I'd clicked on the profile. Derek Reynolds, my ex-boyfriend, the inspiration himself. Derek was commenting on my husband's divorce announcement, taking his side, telling him he was better off without me. The humiliation had been total and complete. I'd called Rachel. She'd answered on the first ring. "Tell me this is some kind of misunderstanding," she'd said without preamble. I effed up. My voice had come out broken, tears starting again. "Rach, I really effed up." "What were you thinking? Telling James to look at your ex's photos for inspiration?" "I wasn't thinking. We were fighting about how everything feels routine and boring, and I said something stupid. I was trying to make a point about wanting more effort, and it came out all wrong." "It came out exactly right. That's the problem. Monica, be honest with me. Are you still in love with Derek?" The question I'd been avoiding for 2 years. "I don't know." "That's a yes." "It's not. I mean, I love the memory of Derek, the idea of Derek, but the actual Derek, the one who forgot my birthday 3 times and made me feel crazy for wanting basic respect. No, I'm not in love with that person." "But you're in love with who you remember him being." "Maybe. Yeah, I guess." And James figured that out. James has known for months. He found a photo I kept. He's been watching me compare them. He's been waiting for me to cross a line. "The photo in your nightstand?" "Monica, I told you to throw that away years ago." "I know, I should have, but I couldn't. I kept thinking maybe someday I'd stop missing what Derek and I had. Maybe someday I'd be happy with what James gave me. But it never happened. Because you never let it happen. You kept one foot out the door the whole time." Rachel had always been brutally honest. It was one of her best and worst qualities. "What do I do?" I'd asked. "How do I fix this?" "Can you fix it? James already filed for divorce. He's done, Monica. Really done. And honestly, maybe he should be." "Whose side are you on?" "I'm on the side of reality. And reality is that you've spent 2 years wishing your husband was someone else. That's not fair to him. That's not fair to you. That's not a marriage." "But I don't want a divorce." "What do you want? Really want? Because if you had a magic wand and could have anything, would you choose James? Or would you choose the fantasy version of Derek that never existed?" I hadn't been able to answer, because the truth was too complicated and too damning. "That's what I thought," Rachel had said softly. "Monica, I love you, but you need to figure out what you actually want before you try to fix anything, because right now, you don't even know." We'd talked for another hour, but nothing had been resolved. Rachel had been sympathetic but firm. I'd created this situation, and I needed to face the consequences. After we'd hung up, I'd lain in the dark hotel room, listening to the air conditioner hum, trying to process everything. James had planned this, had prepared for this, had known for 3 months that I was keeping Derek's photo, had known I was comparing them, had known I wasn't fully committed. He'd drawn up divorce papers, called a lawyer, just waited for the right moment to execute his exit. The man I'd dismissed as boring and predictable had been running a strategic operation I'd never seen coming. Around 2 a.m., I'd opened my laptop and done something I'd been avoiding for 2 years. I'd gone through my old files, my old messages, my old photos, everything from my relationship with Derek, all the evidence of what I'd been clinging to. And I'd seen it clearly for the first time. The relationship I'd been idealizing, the one I'd been comparing James to, the one I'd been using as inspiration, it had been toxic. Derek's texts, "Where are you? Why aren't you answering? Are you with someone else?" Possessive, controlling. Derek's cancellations, "Can't make it to your work thing tonight. Something came up." Over and over, my needs always secondary to his. Derek's criticisms, "That dress makes you look desperate." "Why do you care what your friends think?" Slowly eroding my confidence. I'd forgotten all of that. Or no, I'd deliberately forgotten it. I'd kept only the good memories, the spontaneous adventures, the passionate moments, the feeling of being wanted intensely. I'd discarded all the bad parts and created a fantasy version of Derek that never existed. And I'd measured James, kind, steady, reliable James, against that fantasy. No wonder he'd been planning his escape. No wonder he'd finally had enough. I'd spent the rest of the night going through those files, destroying the fantasy I'd built, deleting photos, erasing messages, confronting the reality of what Derek and I had actually been. Two young, immature people with chemistry, but no compatibility. By morning, I'd understood, but understanding came too late. James had already left. The next week passed in a blur of humiliation and reality checks. James had been efficient. Divorce papers were served by Monday. A separation agreement drawn up by Wednesday. Division of assets proposed by Friday. He wasn't being vindictive, wasn't taking everything or making unreasonable demands. He was just being James, methodical, fair, thorough, which somehow made it worse. If he'd been angry or cruel, I could have fought back, but his calm reasonableness left me with nothing to push against. I'd moved in with my parents temporarily. My mother had hugged me when I'd arrived, but hadn't sugar-coated her opinion. "Sweetheart, what were you thinking?" I wasn't. "Clearly, James is a good man, one of the best, and you threw him away because you couldn't let go of someone who wasn't good for you." "I know." "Do you? Because I don't think you do. I think you're upset because you got caught, not because you understand what you did wrong." She'd been right. The first few days I'd been focused on the embarrassment, the public nature of my failure, the way everyone was taking James's side. I'd been treating it like a PR problem instead of a relationship problem. But as the week wore on, alone in my childhood bedroom surrounded by boxes of my things that James had professionally packed and delivered, I'd started to actually process what had happened. I'd been given exactly what I'd said I wanted after Derek: security, stability, someone who showed up and did the work. And I'd spent 2 years resenting James for giving me exactly that. Resenting him for not being exciting enough, spontaneous enough, passionate enough, for being what I'd asked for instead of what I'd secretly still wanted. Thursday afternoon, I'd done something stupid. I'd messaged Derek. "We need to talk." He'd responded within minutes. "About what?" "About us. About what you wrote on James's post." I was just being supportive. Guy's going through a divorce because of you. Figured he deserved some solidarity. "You don't even know him." "I know enough. I know you kept photos of me. I know you compared him to me. I know you couldn't let go. And you're proud of that?" There'd been a long pause. Then, "Monica, why are you texting me?" "I need to understand something. What we had, was it real? Or did I make it into something it wasn't? Does it matter now?" "Yes, it matters, because I destroyed my marriage over the memory of what we had, so I need to know if it was worth destroying." Another pause. Then, "We were kids, Monica, college kids who had fun together. We had chemistry, sure, but we also fought constantly. I was jealous and controlling. You were clingy and demanding. We brought out the worst in each other. But the good parts were good, I'm not denying that, but they weren't enough to build a life on. That's why we broke up. That's why we never tried to make it work long distance. We both knew it wouldn't. So why did I spend 2 years comparing my husband to you? Because you romanticized what we had, made it better in your memory than it actually was. That's what people do when they're unhappy. They rewrite the past to seem better than the present. Were you happy? With your life now? I'm engaged, actually. Have been for 6 months. Getting married in the spring. That had hit me like a punch to the stomach. You're engaged. Yeah, to someone who actually wants to be with me, not with some idealized version of who I used to be. That's not fair. Monica, I saw the photo James posted, the one of us from college that you kept hidden in your nightstand. I've been with my fiancé for 3 years. In that entire time, I've never once kept a photo of an ex hidden anywhere. Because I moved on. You didn't. I did move on. I got married. No, you got safe. There's a difference. And now you're paying the price for trying to have both, the security of James and the fantasy of me. I don't want the fantasy anymore. I want reality. Good. Start with accepting reality. James is done with you, your marriage is over, and I'm engaged to someone else. So, whatever closure you're looking for from me, you're not going to get it. Derek, move on, Monica. For real this time. Not to another safe guy you'll secretly resent. To someone you actually want. Or better yet, figure out who you are without needing to define yourself through whoever you're with. He'd logged off then, ending the conversation on his terms the way he always had, and I'd sat there in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the ruins of my life, finally understanding what I'd done. I'd married James because he was safe. I'd kept Derek in my heart because he was exciting. I'd tried to have both by living in the past while secured in the present. And in the process, I destroyed the one real, honest thing I'd had, a man who'd actually loved me completely. It's been 3 weeks since James kicked me out. 3 weeks since he packed my things and watched me leave. 3 weeks since I destroyed my marriage, with one sentence about inspiration. The divorce is proceeding smoothly. James's lawyer sends documents, I sign them, my lawyer returns them. It's all very civilized and efficient and heartbreaking. I'm still at my parents' house, looking for my own apartment, trying to rebuild a life that doesn't revolve around either James or the fantasy of Derek. It's harder than I expected. I didn't realize how much of my identity had been wrapped up in being someone's wife, someone's girlfriend, someone's partner. Rachel visits every few days, checking on me, making sure I'm eating, forcing me to face reality instead of wallowing. Have you talked to him? She'd asked yesterday. James? No, he won't respond to my texts. His lawyer handles everything. Maybe that's better. Clean break. Maybe. Do you regret it? What you said? I'd thought about that question a lot over 3 weeks. I regret saying it the way I did. I regret hurting him. But I don't know if I regret revealing the truth, because that's what it was, the truth. I was comparing them. I was living in the past. He deserved to know that instead of living with someone who was only half present. That's growth, I guess. Painful growth. The kind where you realize you've been lying to yourself for years and you've hurt people in the process. I deleted all of Derek's photos, all the messages, all the saved memories, all the evidence of the fantasy I'd built. I'd forced myself to remember the bad parts, the fights, the jealousy, the way he'd made me feel small and needy. And I'd forced myself to remember the good parts of James, the way he'd brought me coffee in bed every Sunday, the way he'd listened to my work problems and actually offered helpful solutions, the way he'd planned thoughtful dates and remembered every preference I'd ever mentioned. I'd had something good, something real, something built on actual compatibility instead of dramatic intensity, and I'd thrown it away because I'd been too immature to appreciate it. Last week, I'd seen James at the grocery store. He'd been in the produce section, carefully selecting vegetables the way he always did, and my heart had physically ached seeing him. I'd started to approach him, then stopped, watched him from a distance instead. He'd looked, not happier, exactly, but lighter, like a weight had been lifted, like he was finally free from competing with a ghost. He'd been with someone, a woman I didn't recognize, talking animatedly while he smiled and nodded. Not a date, probably just a friend, but the ease between them had hurt. He'd never looked that relaxed with me. I'd left without approaching him. What would I have said? I'm sorry for comparing you to my ex and keeping his photos and never fully committing to our marriage. He already knew all that. My apology wouldn't change anything. My mother knocked on my bedroom door yesterday afternoon. You have mail, from James's lawyer. Final divorce decree, signed by a judge, official and binding. Our marriage, declared legally over after 2 years. I'd signed where indicated, my hand shaking, and mailed it back. And that was it. Done. Over. The marriage I'd sabotaged with one sentence about inspiration was officially dissolved. I'd pulled out my laptop and written this whole story, trying to make sense of what happened, trying to understand how I went from married to divorced in 3 weeks, trying to figure out where I went wrong and how I can avoid making the same mistakes again. The truth is complicated and shameful and entirely my fault. I married a good man while still in love with a fantasy. I kept physical evidence of my inability to move on. I compared every gesture, every date, every moment to something that never really existed. And when my husband called me out on it, when he'd had enough of being second choice, I'd destroyed everything with 7 words. Look at old photos of my ex for inspiration. I didn't mean it literally, but I meant it emotionally. I meant that he wasn't enough, that he needed to be more like Derek, that he was failing to meet a standard set by someone who'd been terrible for me, but who I'd idealized beyond recognition. James understood that. He'd been understanding it for months, maybe years. He'd just been waiting for me to say it out loud so he'd have the courage to leave. And when I finally gave him that reason, he'd acted swiftly and decisively. Packed my things, kicked me out, filed for divorce, all within hours. The man I'd dismissed as boring and predictable had been the smartest person in the room. He'd recognized that I would never be fully his, as long as I was partly Derek's, and he'd chosen his own happiness over hoping I'd eventually choose him. I told him to look at old photos of my ex for inspiration. He watched me pack instead, and now I'm sitting in my childhood bedroom, divorced at 32, trying to figure out who I am when I'm not defined by which man I'm with or which man I'm remembering. It's going to take a long time, maybe years, but at least now I'm finally facing reality instead of living in fantasy. James deserves someone who chooses him first, who doesn't need inspiration from exes because the man in front of her is enough. I hope he finds that. I genuinely hope he finds someone who appreciates what I was too foolish to appreciate. And me, I hope I learn from this. Hope I grow enough that the next person I'm with gets all of me, not just the parts that aren't stuck in the past. But that's future work. Right now, I'm just trying to accept what I did and why I lost everything because of it. I destroyed my own marriage. And the worst part, I deserve to watch it happen.